But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about pitching like a pro. So for those of you who have no idea who I am, I've been a full-time freelance content marketing consultant for over 3 years, almost 4 years actually this summer. And I've worked with some pretty big brands and people, Amy Porterfield, Shopify, Patreon, Zapier, Unbound, just to name drop a little bit. And I'm so grateful for getting to work with those great brands and people. But I can't chalk it all up to luck. I really do feel like there are clear things that every freelancer needs to do in order to land those high ticket clients like the ones that you're putting in the chat right now. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Now, before I dive into the main presentation, I just have a few more questions for you. I like to keep things engaging if you haven't already noticed. So feel free to put like a yes or no if you can relate to the next few questions. So my first question, have you ever seen other freelancers or other entrepreneurs landing these big clients and thought to yourself, what the heck, what are they doing that I'm not? So yes, just feel to put a yes or no in the chat if you can relate to that. Okay. You can kind of okay, seeing some yeses, but I'm in my first year. Yep. Every time I hop on Twitter, yes, I get it. Okay, next question. I think there's also always like a bit of the delay with Zoom, so feel free to just respond, but I will just keep going to keep the flow going. So second question, have you ever felt like you've had to take on crap gigs to pay your dues? I'll even put my hand up to that. Okay, and the last question, oh, definitely yes, and I'm tired of it. Okay. And the very last question here, maybe have you ever felt lost on how to really stand out from the crowd and pitch yourself in a way that gets people to take notice? I'll say yes, 100%. Okay, all right. So you're in the right place because I'm definitely going to help you with all of that. Oh, introverted freelancer. Yes, definitely me too. Okay. I've had to work at this to get better at public speaking. It's not my natural state. Okay. So one thing I just want to let you know is that, and I'm sure you've already felt it because I totally get it. Right now, the freelance market is more competitive than ever. There are over 2 million workers who have joined since the pandemic, and it's estimated that the total number of freelancers will surpass 90 million by 2028, and that's just in the States. Now, if you're seeing those stats and thinking, oh gosh, what have I done? Why have I dived into such a competitive field? I also feel like there's never been a better time to dive in. Yes, there is a lot of competition, but there's also a lot of demand. This is a stat from Canada, which is where I'm based. Nearly 70% of Canadian employers are expected to hire more freelancers and contract workers in the next 2 years. And 64% of the believe that freelancers or gig workers will substantially replace full-time workers within the next 5 years. In other words, business is really booming, and I truly feel like there's more than enough work to go around. So fortunately for you, here's what you're going to learn by the end of today's training. We'll talk about the 3 things you need to do to land those high ticket clients, the ones that you're talking about. I'll share my go-to process for reaching out to those clients. And then we'll also be I'll share some of my tips for building an irresistible freelance brand, because I really do feel like landing those clients goes both ways. You do need to do some outreach and pitch yourself, but I also think it's important that you build a brand so that people can find you and that you can attract those clients to you as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sound good? We're excited? Cool. So step 1, do great work. Don't worry, I will dive into this more. This is the only thing that I'm going to talk about. But I do want to just say this right off the top, because I think sometimes just doing the work and get a bit lost in this, the marketing and the branding and the sales and all of those things. All of those things are really, really important. And then we'll talk about that too. But at the end of the day, if you want to work with the best, you really need to be the best. You need to be at the top. And this is just not just, this doesn't just apply to what you do, but also how you do it. So I'm going to break this down even further. What does great work really, really look like? So step 1A, you could say, is to hone your craft. It means really landing those dream clients doesn't happen overnight. I mean, if it does, then maybe you should be running this workshop and not me. But I've definitely had to work to leverage the work that I've done to get those bigger and bigger opportunities. So I'll give you a little bit of insight. This was my very first paid writing assignment. I was writing $20 recap blogs for this entertainment website on Snooki and JWoww, which is a reality show, and Degrassi, The Next Generation. I guess I'm dating myself a little bit, but this is about 10 years ago. So this was my first assignment. This is where I'm starting. I'm seeing some people loving the throwbacks. Yes, this is where I cut my teeth as a freelance writer. But over time, I got better. I started out doing those recap blogs, but even the website that I was working with, I did my best to really knock those blog posts out of the park. And the editors at that website took notice, and they invited me to take on bigger opportunities. So with that website, I was able to interview some really cool celebrities. And then once I had those kinds of articles under my belt, I was able to pitch the work or leverage the work I was doing at that website to get even bigger and bigger clients. So as you can see, now I'm out of the entertainment field. Now I mostly write about marketing. And these are some bylines that I've had with Shopify and Unbounce. But basically what I'm trying to say is it is a progressive process, and you really want this here, look at now I want to do a bit more. And this, from Snooki and JWoww to Shopify, was about 10 years for me, but I don't think it needs to take that long. It really just, you just really need to start and work at it. And yeah, start where you are. Don't discount what you're doing right now. Maybe if you're not working with the Fenty Beauties of the world, whoever you're working with now, you have no idea who they're connected to or what they're seeing or what opportunities might be available to you within the clients you're already working with. So just continually do great work and practice. So step 2, do what you say you will do. So this is really comes down to being. I see tweets like this all the time where people are like, I think the secret to being a successful freelancer is just being reliable. And I really do think that's true for most service providers. You can really be the most talented person in the world, but if you don't really follow through on that promise that you've told your clients that you're going to do, you won't get very far, and you're gonna build a not so great reputation. So what this means really is just being professional, meeting deadlines, responding to emails promptly, being as professional as possible. Something that I really try to keep in mind is to treat every new project as an audition. So a lot of these articles that I got, that was like my very first article at those publications, and I did not take it all. And this is not to say that you all are doing that at all in any way, but that I'm just trying to kind of, I guess, explain the mindset that I usually have going into these things, which is to, for me, the sales process doesn't end after I've landed that client or they signed the contract. It just keeps going, right? Because even though you've maybe gotten that deposit in, they're still judging you. They're still waiting to see if you can really do what you say you're going to do. So that first assignment has to be killer. And usually from there, like once I've proven myself, it gets a little bit easier. The pressure's off a little bit. I'm still doing great work, but there's a little less anxiety, I guess you could say. But as the common saying goes, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. So really make it count. And this is something too writers to support my business now. And I noticed this too, where some writers really try to do their best work, and then some people kind of phone it in a little bit. And unfortunately, maybe those people who phoned it in could do better work, but because that's the only time I've seen their work, it doesn't really bode well for me giving them more work if the first assignment didn't go so well. And lastly, great work really looks like wowing your client. So by this, I don't mean you need to over deliver. I don't need you need to write 2,000 words when they ask for 1,000, or deliver 200 photos when you only said you don't give them 100. What I really mean is this wowing them with your process, with your customer service, and basically your project management. How easy, how simple is it to work with you? This is really the difference, I'd say, between a good freelancer and a really, really great freelancer. And this is even feedback that I've gotten from my clients as well, because I always ask them when I ask for testimonials, why did you work with me? What impressed you about my work? And these three things are the things that the feedback I tend to get a lot. So some ways that you can really wow your client, if you can, trying to deliver that work ahead of time. That always, is super impressive to anybody, where it's like, oh, wow, this person's really on the ball. But at least, on time for sure. Making it really easy for them to communicate with you, back and forth, playing email tag all the time with your clients, or have you created forms, or do you use Slack to really minimize that inbox overwhelm and keep things really, really streamlined? And onboarding as well. Like, are you constantly asking them questions, or do you have documents that you could just sort of send to them and then have them sent back to you so they can just do everything all in one go? Those little things really, really matter and can really help people and help you stand out. And lastly, making them feel special. So for me, like a thing that I always do every year is I send my clients a gift. When I started, it was just a digital gift card. Now I've kind of stepped my game up a little bit, and if you're thinking, okay, I don't really have the budget for that, even just a thank you card can go a really long way. Not a lot of service providers do this. It's kind of like how they say after an interview, you should send a thank you email. I think the same thing goes for your client work as well. That customer service is really, really key. And these small gestures can go a long way. Like one of my clients, a past client of mine, I asked him for some advice, and he was like, just keep doing what you're doing. Those client gifts. I was like, really? Like the gift cards? Like that's the difference? He's like, yeah, like it really, not a lot of people do that. And it always brings a smile on my face when I see you do that. So yeah, those little touches can go just a point about questions. I will try to answer questions at the end, but I see some that are like pretty relevant, so I'm just going to answer it now. Shannon asks, is that a winter holiday / New Year's gift, or do you do it at other times? So for me, just for simplicity's sake, I do it at the end of the year so I can just send it all in one go. I know there's a lot of people who say, oh, you should send it at a different time because everybody expects gifts around the holidays. But, I'm busy and it is hard to keep track of those every single individual client milestone. So some people, might send it as an onboarding gift or a gift at the end of the project. But I found it's been really easy for me to send it at the end of the year as like a holiday gift. And yes, people expect gifts, but like, I don't know, I love gifts. I don't care if I'm getting more. It's still something, a gift I didn't expect. And an amount that is appropriate, really up to you. I think I saw a formula of around 1% of how much they spent with you is a formula. But for me, I'll be quite honest, my range is $20 to $30 a client. So whatever really you can afford, because once you do the math and that 20 times however many clients, maybe that's out of your budget. So yeah, whatever you think is affordable. So step 2, talk about your work and get other people to talk about you too. Because if people don't know about you, they can't find you. And while yes, your work should speak for itself, I hear this a lot where it's like, I'm good at what I do. I should just people should just kind of come to me. I shouldn't have to, toot your own horn, but I'll say it, you do. It really does help to, put yourself out there, as everybody says, and just show off what you can do. It really helps to keep people top of mind. You can think about yourself, like if you've ever had to, excuse me, if anybody's ever asked you for, let's say, a referral, who's the first person that you refer? Probably somebody that you've interacted with recently, or maybe somebody who you've seen on social media. I know that's my first step. Like, I know tons of graphic designers, and I get requests for referrals for graphic designers all the time. But the people I tend to refer are just the people I see. And of course they're good, but there's other people who are just as good, but because I don't see them, I'm not talking about them. So let's break this down too. So really, what does talking about your work look like? Because I do see people doing this, not necessarily the wrong way, but not in the most fruitful way, we could say. A really key part of this is sharing the transformation that you provide. A mistake I see a lot of freelancers make is simply sharing their work or how-to content. So if you're a writer, you might share an article about how to write an about page, and you assume that because you've shown people how to write one, they'll hire you to write theirs, right? Which actually doesn't really work out so well. A better process is to really show like how you've taken them from point A to point B. So let's say it's something like design, showing that before and after of a design project can really emphasize what you've done, and show where you started and where they've gotten to, much more than simply writing about how you do a design project, or just sharing like, oh, here's a website I designed. I might see, oh, great website. When you saw where they started, it really is like, oh, okay, they really did a lot of work. So this is something I don't really do social media management anymore, but this is a post I shared that I guess is kind of an example of how you could show the transformation. So the grid on the left is where the clients where they started. You can see it's a mishmash. There's some black and white photos. There's some stock photos. It's unclear. And then when my team took over, we established a much cleaner, a clear like visual look and feel, clear brand colors, just like really nicely designed graphics. So it just shows a little bit more of how we impacted them. And in the caption, I also shared some of the impact numbers of how, like, the increase in engagement and things like that. But these sorts of posts can really help show people what you can do. Second step here is gathering social proof. So by social proof, I mean reviews, testimonials, ratings, anything that other people have said about you that shows other people how good you are. So this is the whole getting other people to talk about you part, because you can share your work till the cows come home, but they've probably been burned before. They've probably worked with other service providers that do the same thing that you do, and they need to know that you're the real deal. And one of the best ways to do that is to share other people's positive feedback on your work. So for me, after every client, I always try to send them a testimonial form to get their feedback. I'm actually working on a project right now with a videographer friend of mine to create testimonial videos that will live on my website so that people can literally see my clients and hear them talking about their experience working with me. Again, I'm 4 years into the game, so this is kind of how I'm trying to step things up, but literally just asking for a review or asking for somebody to write a few sentences is really everything as you're building your portfolio and building your credibility. And lastly, try to take people behind the scenes. So when you're talking about your work, talk about a little bit about your process. So if you're a photographer, you could take people behind the scenes of a shoot. Again, as a designer, you can maybe show how you organize your workflow, or even as a writer, you can talk about your process. It's easy to see the final product, but again, these higher ticket clients, they're experienced, and they probably understand. what am I trying to say? Let me rewind. So it's easy to share the final product, but if it took a long time to get there, or if it was a difficult process, that's not great, right? So in addition to just talking about your work, you also want to show people how easy it is to work with you and what a great experience it is. Like that's also feedback I tend to get a lot, where clients are like, I mean, a lot of my clients I end up becoming friends with them because we're so aligned and we get along so well. But that's intentional. Like I'm not intentionally trying to be friends with them, but I am intentionally trying to make the process really fun and as simple and easy and stress-free as possible. So, and of course they get a good result. So you can think of it as like a, maybe a home renovation, right? If you hire some contractors and they do a good job, but there was tons of delays, they were hard to get a hold of, the whole process was just felt like pulling teeth, you're probably not going to work with them again just because just no matter how good the result was. So yeah, taking people behind the scenes and showing them, that experience is really, really key. And last section of this presentation, inviting people to work with you. Because there's a reason this presentation is called Pitch Like a Pro. You can see I didn't talk a lot about pitching because I do think that in order to pitch yourself well, you need those steps 1 and 2. You need to have great work that you can show people, and then you need to be able to talk about your work in a really effective way. So the third step is then actually making that ask. That's the pitch. So how do you do this? I will walk you through it. This is the exact strategy outreach clients like Unbounce and Zapier. Sorry. I'm just getting over a bit of a cold, so apologies for my little bit scraggly voice here. So inviting people to work with you. Step 1, make a list of potential clients in your niche. The more, the merrier. If it helps, this is a step, and you have the budget, this is definitely a step that you can outsource to somebody like a virtual assistant, because essentially this is just, just pulling data together. So first step is really make a list of potential clients in your niche. So for example, like I work, one of my specialties is HR. So I would, and I can, of course, as a freelancer, you can pretty much work with anybody in the world, right? But maybe just to start, I will look at HR companies in Canada and the States. So once I have a list of companies, now you want to think of who would be the best person to reach out to, because this is also a mistake I see sometimes people making. And I'm sure we've all gotten those LinkedIn spam messages where you're like, who are you? You know nothing about me. Why are you talking to me? So the key really with outreach is to be specific and know who you're trying to reach. So as a content marketing consultant myself, I know that I typically work with content managers. So these are the people, these are the job titles that I'm looking out for. Of course, with LinkedIn, I'd say outreaching on LinkedIn is a lot easier than cold outreach through email, also because of the legality around anti-spam laws. Now, a lot of, it's actually, I think, illegal to just cold email people. They have to like provide you with your email. Not a lawyer, so that's not legal advice, but that's my experience. But with LinkedIn, you can do more cold outreach. So with LinkedIn, you can search the exact job titles and companies. So this is a great way to get super, super specific on who you're trying to reach. And then the last step is really following up. A lot of times people reach out once, and then, or they do this process, maybe they reach out to 50 people, they get no responses, and they tell me, they come back and they're like, it doesn't work. Nobody got back to me. And I always ask, like, how many times did you actually follow up? Because I've definitely had clients where sometimes it's been weeks or even months before they're finally ready to work with me. And this is where I think it's so important to be empathetic, right? To really put yourself in your client's shoes, because it's easy to be like, oh, they ignored my message, they must not want to work with me. But think of how much is probably going on in your own life, right? Maybe you're sick, maybe your kids are sick, maybe the company you're working at has gone through a change in management, maybe they haven't solidified a million different reasons as to why they might not have responded to you that have nothing to do with how good you are or whether they want to work with you or not. So that's why it's really important to follow up and be persistent, not in an annoying way. I do try to reach out a minimum of 4 times. And in that 4th message, I'll usually say, hey, haven't heard from you. I don't want to bug you. So let me know if you're interested or not, and I'll leave you alone. So that's a really good way to say what you need to say. And I find that email or that message tends to get a lot of responses because people will either be like, yeah, sorry, not interested, or I'll get a, oh, actually, no, we are really interested. We're working on some stuff on our end. And I'm like, okay, great, I've got a response. And then my response to that would be like, okay, when should we connect? Maybe I can reach out, I can circle back in a month, I can circle back in 3 months. My key with outreach is to always try to get a response. If it's a no, it's a no. I'm not too pressed about it. But if it's a not right now, that's still an opportunity. So I will just try to see what their schedule is like and eventually get that call, hopefully. So let's do a little recap here. So we've got the 3 key steps: doing great work, talking about your work, and then inviting people to work with you. And then we have those sub steps. So under the do great work, hone your craft, do what you said you would do, you will do, and wow your client. One sec, water break. Step 2, talk about your work and get other people to talk about you too. Remember to be strategic here. You're not just, sharing links to articles or pictures or things like that. You really want to show people what it's like to work with you. Share the transformation, gather that social proof, take people behind the scenes, really try to paint a picture of what it is like to experience your service. And lastly, invite people to work with you. So this is my step-by-step outreach process. Make a list of potential clients in your niche. This is also really key. You want to make sure that you're reaching out to people that you would be most aligned for. Reach out to those people and then follow up, follow up, follow up. And I have some final thoughts here. So remember, persistence is key. It does take time to build a personal brand. It does take time to do this outreach process. It's not easy, but then again, running a business is not easy. So the key for me, at least, is to just always see everything as a learning opportunity. So maybe you try reaching out to people and you don't get any hits, or you get a lot of no's. If you get a no, ask them, hey, why is this not a good fit for you right now? It can be totally scary to do that, but it's so, whenever I've done it, it has been so illuminating for me. Just to even know why people turn you down. Like a lot of times, either it's not the right time or they don't have the budget. So that gives me an option to figure out what would be a better fit, right? So if they don't have the budget, I'm not going to just lower my prices, but I might recommend maybe a lower priced offer that I think could help them. If it's not the right time, like I said, I could just circle back in a few months and check in with them and see if that's a better time. There's so many clients where, we might have started talking in December, but then by July, they're ready. And that was just their journey. The second step, getting comfortable putting yourself out there. So yes, this process of, creating content or talking about yourself can feel really uncomfortable, especially for those of us who are a bit more on the introverted side. So baby steps, for instance, if you're just getting used to using social media, a first step might be just reposting other people's content, sharing some links, or responding to other people's content. Then maybe once you get more comfortable with that, you could start creating your own content. Then from there, maybe you start doing like Instagram stories and really talking about and putting yourself on video. And then you might feel more comfortable to do things like this, like hosting webinars. So just do whatever feels comfortable, whatever that first step is. And the more it's like the classic, it's like riding a bike, but honestly it is, as somebody who is still very introverted, but used to be a lot shyer and a lot more scared to talk about myself and share my work, it was really just a process of, first I started, going to networking events, and I made a goal to try to talk to 3 people, and then I would go home. And then once I got more comfortable, then I would be like, okay, let's try to talk to a few more people. Then I started doing more online things. So I really just built up the confidence from there. And then the third thing is to really focus on building relationships. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about pitching, this is sales, right? You're selling yourself. And people get uncomfortable with the idea of sales because they feel like sales is pushy or icky. You get the idea of that used car salesman in your head, pushing something on you that you don't want, or that you might feel that that's what you're doing to other people. But it's really not the case, especially if you focus on building relationships. So like I said, even if somebody says no, I'm not completely discounting them in my head, because we've still had some sort of interaction, and it's an opportunity for me to get to know them a little bit better, to understand their likes or dislikes, to maybe build trust. If they're not quite ready to invest in you, understanding why can help you figure out, okay, what do people need to feel comfortable working with me? And just having a genuine interest in what they're doing. Like whenever I do outreach or sales or anything like that, I always try to let people know, whether we work together or not, I honestly enjoyed getting to know you and learn about your business. Because for me, that's genuinely true. I am a curious person and fascinating to hear about what people are working on and how I could potentially help them. And whether they work with me or somebody else, I don't see that as a negative, regardless of whether I get booked and paid or not. So when you really switch it from, kind of sending everything out there or putting messages out where kind of like that kind of spray and pray approach, just like blasting your social media or people with information and hoping you get a bite, and focus more on like, actually, who do I really want to get to know? Like, why do I really want to get to know them? People can really see the difference, and they'll respond a little bit better. Okay, awesome. So that's it for my presentation. There are some questions here, so I will get to those in a second. So I just want to let you know, if you're interested in staying in touch, you can follow me on Instagram at Jasmine Williams Media, Twitter at the Jas Williams. I also have some free resources on my website, which I can put in the chat. Give me a second, because I did not have this queued up. I probably should have. But they're on my website, jasminewilliams.ca/resources. If you go there, you can download some of the free resources I have. I have a freelance rate calculator and a business setup checklist that I created to help freelancers get started. So that's that. And one sec, I'm just going to post it in the boom. Cool. All right, so should I get started on some of these questions here? I think I will.
I think go for it. Yeah, and
Awesome.
maybe pull back the deck so that we can see each other as well as you're answering questions.
Yes.
Great.
There we go.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I've gotten some people message me directly, and I think there's some in the chat, so I'll do my best to answer both of them. So somebody asked me, can you share your client testimonial form template? I do actually have a client testimonial form. I'm just trying to think of how I could get the link to everybody. But if that's something,
yeah, we can share it in the community
okay,
after the fact when we post the recording as well.
Cool. Right. So yeah, I'll get that link to you, and so you can post it. But yeah, I have, it's basically just a form, and I ask a couple of questions just to help to shape the testimonial a little bit, because I find that can help as well. Because sometimes when you ask people for a testimonial, they'll just be like, oh, Jasmine's great, loved it. And that doesn't really give people a lot of insight into what it's really like to work with me and what the impact is. So yeah, I'll share those questions that I ask for sure. Another question I've gotten, is it better to email or cold call? So yeah, cold calling, I haven't actually tried that. I think it really depends on the industry and who you're trying to reach. So for instance, I'm in a business community where somebody has been trying to reach like contractors, like home contractors. So any business that's a bit more, I don't want to say old school, but maybe not quite so digital, they might be a good, they might be a little bit more receptive to cold calls. But I know for me, I work with a lot of marketing and tech companies, which I think that would be pretty inappropriate if I just tried to ring them up. And it's also very hard sometimes to actually call people, especially now in this digital age. So for me, my approach has always been LinkedIn has been good. Slack groups are really helpful. So if you're in any Slack groups for your industry, like I'm in a couple of marketing Slack groups, which has been helpful for me to connect with marketing managers in the corporate world, because those are my key clients. So yeah, really understanding who your niche is. Like, let's say you build Shopify websites, like Shopify has tons of, Facebook groups and Slack groups and things like that for people. So yeah, I'd say LinkedIn is great. Slack groups are great. And then Twitter has also been pretty effective as well. Like there's different kind of communities on Twitter, and I just always try to keep an eye out for different opportunities. So if I see a client or see a company in my niche that's looking for freelance writers, then I will respond to that or send them a DM. Sometimes, yeah, it can be helpful to just sort of wait to see who's looking, and rather than just pitching yourself cold, because at least then okay, they're looking for talent versus just putting a shot in the dark. So those are my approaches. And then I think I said earlier with email, there are anti-spam laws. I know here in Canada, it's called CASL, and I believe in the States as well. So you do have to be really careful with email outreach, because if you're not getting if you don't have the emails, or you haven't gotten them in a manner that's, I guess, legal, then you could be doing something not so great. Okay.
Just to layer onto that, I found it really successful in that kind of sequence of emails. And I think it's really useful to think about it as a sequence of emails. But in the first one, you kind of introduce yourself, provide some links and stuff. The second one can then very appreciably be, hey, are you the right person to be talking about with this? And then they might not be the right person, but email conversations can kind of then navigate really naturally to the right person or be forwarded along. And that can be like, that takes care of your 1-2 punch. And then the third one can be like, here's a recent project that I did and I really loved and felt like it could be something that you might be interested in, that type of project. So then already you kind of have a sequence of 3 emails and maybe a fourth one then, Jasmine, to your point about like, hey, I'm bothering you with this, like happy to check in at a later date when this might be more relevant. But I think that sequence has typically helped, makes it really forwardable, makes sure that if people are batching their clean through them on the weekends, you still have that touch point as well.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. Like, yeah, you don't want to just be sending in that, just checking in, just following up, because that gets really annoying. So you do want to try to tailor your approach each time. I just remembered I have a paid product that's called Grab and Go Email Templates, which is basically all the templates, email templates and messaging templates I use in my business. But I do actually created like a freebie version of that, with some email messages that would be really relevant to this workshop. So I can also share those with you, Una, and we can put those in the group, so you can at least get a little bit of a taste of kind of how to do this, because I know that's probably the next step is like, well, what do I actually say? And honestly, that's a whole other kind of presentation. I like to really make sure that you're in order for those messages to be received, you kind of want to make sure that you are presenting yourself in a way that people will take notice. So that's kind of what I wanted to the points that I'm driving home. But yeah, I'll share that too. Okay, there's a couple of one more question here. How do you navigate working with corporate clients who may not necessarily want to fill out a questionnaire or use a CRM and are used to just using email or communication? In the photo world, I always get feedback that photo editors and art directors don't want to fill out content forms. Interesting. I mean, that's something that I haven't really come into contact with, and that it might be explaining to them like why maybe you have that form. But I honestly work with a lot of corporate clients, and I yeah, I haven't found that to be an issue. But if they are really against it, if they're against filling out a form, because to me, I'm like, it's a form. It usually takes less time to fill out a form than it would to respond to a full email. But maybe just giving them the option. So possibly if you have a form, you could be like, well, here are the questions, feel free to answer them this way. But yeah, generally I've just kind of let people know, like, these are my processes. This is the way that I tend to work. And that in a way that could be potentially like what I do, especially when I start working with people or start talking to them, is really setting those expectations from the jump of like, this is how I work. These are my processes, and I'm not willing to be flexible on them because of X, Y, and Z. So I find sometimes that might be more earlier on, just letting people know that this is my process. This is the next steps, and kind of showing why you do it this way, how it helps. Like for instance, part of my process when I do copywriting work is I always do an interview with a client. And some people might be like, well, why can't you just send me the questions? I just will fill them out later. I'm like, no, you're hiring me to be a writer. And to be honest, a lot of people are very good at writing. So I'd rather talk to you to get those insights. And so, and I try to make it cheeky that way too. So like make it kind of fun, is like, this is why my process is, and, explain to them that you've done it lots of times, so it works this way. But yeah, hopefully that helps. I'm starting into that issue, but you might just need to be a little bit more firm on, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm using, and why. And another question here. So who helped me with my branding in my website / social? Yeah, no, it's a great question, because I really love my website. So yeah, I worked with two really talented creatives. One person my photography is done by a photographer here in Toronto. Her name is Jenny J. And then my branding is done by, what's her name? Jennifer Rawls. I will put their names. You could just Google them. Oops, sorry, that went directly. I'll put it to everyone. But yeah, they shouldn't be too hard to find. Jennifer, I'm not sure if she's still taking on branding clients, but Jenny, I believe, does photography, if anybody is based in Canada. Yeah, okay, any last questions?
I just have another comment that may solicit some questions too. I know that you touched upon, and some people may be thinking about their rates. I think it's great that you have a rate calculator. Just something that I've been talking with a lot of freelancers lately, and even CEOs of other freelancing focused companies, is just how much interest rates are going to go up, in this current market. And so as much as possible, I would say stick with your current rates, or actually plan for a couple raises this year. Really, really important, because corporate clients are going to be doing that for their employees. And it shouldn't be a tough year to make it clear that because of the current market, because of the current economy, that you need that to afford for your market share, your brain share on their projects, to make sure that you do your absolute best work. And so I would just say, as an annual practice, I definitely encourage looking at those rates kind of in that winter timeframe, November, December, kind of refresh your rates in January, make a whole communication strategy around that. And by that, I mean, basically developing an email for your existing clients and new clients in terms of your rates, and making sure to have a few conversations with other freelancers about what they are charging or what they're expecting, and even kind of create a cheerleading pep squad amongst each other around that. But I think this year in particular, think about kind of raising your rates likely 2 or 3 times, because interest rates, at least in the US, are expected to go up as many as 6 times. And so that will affect, your cost of living in terms of mortgage, in terms of rent, and stuff like that. It's, reflective of what's going on in the Ukraine, locally, budgets being addressed governmentally. And I just think it's worth mentioning because all of us are dependent on the rates that we're charging and how much we're working. And so I just really encourage you to think about your rates, maybe even just today, tomorrow, this weekend, think about raising them 5%, 10%. It's not a whole lot in the context of an article or an hour or even a day rate, but it can really impact your bottom line as you're pulling more clients in going forward.
Yeah, no, that's a fabulous point. Okay, so I have one question here. That's a really good one because I've definitely dealt with this. So the person asked, I'm over 7 years into my PR marketing biz, great website, great testimonials, case studies, yet sometimes I don't win client contracts because I'm a solo consultant and the client seems to think they need to hire a multi-person team. Any thoughts on getting around that? Lots of thoughts, yes, because I've definitely been in this position for sure. I've had clients tell me the same thing where they're like, oh, we just don't think you can take this on. And it sucks. Some ways though that you can better position yourself. Again, that the proof, like, can you show them that you've taken on projects of this size? Or if you haven't, can you at least show how well you've done maybe smaller projects? So to really show them that you can do it. Do you have other people that you could bring in potentially to support you on that project? Like I know I have a partner, or not really a partner, but like a business friend of mine who runs an SEO agency. I have another friend who does Facebook ads. And whenever they're looking for other people to get involved, I'm really quick to bring them in. So they know that like I can make sure that whatever I can't do on my own, I know very great people who could pick up the slack. But it is a tricky thing. I've had a conversation with an old client of mine where I asked them this too, where I've had people, he said that, because I do tend to charge on the higher end for my writing rates. And he said that he internally had to really go to bat for me to justify to his project or to his colleagues my rates, like why they were so expensive. And they said like, oh, like she charges as much as an agency, why don't we go with an agency? And I found that so fascinating because if you're getting the same quality of work, does it matter if it's a lot of people or one person? Like, so it does seem to be like there is a bias in certain worlds, I think, where people just assume agency equals better or agency can do more, and they tend to discount us as solo people because they just think. And I do find like, as much as you can do to really position that you can take on the work, sometimes that can be it can just be hard to get over. I'd say one last thing though that you could do is potentially pitch them on like a test project. This is a strategy that I've been using a lot in my business, especially with those bigger clients. So what I will do only for clients that I really do think have potential is offering like a one-off blog post or just a really small, like maybe 2 articles when they really want 4 or 5. And, just just testing the relationship, letting them know, like, we do this. If you don't like it, we can part ways. If you don't, it's all good. Or you know what I mean? Other way around. So yeah, definitely a test project has been a way for me to just minimize risk. Because when I think about that, it's like the idea of an objection. It's like, what are they really telling you? It's like, really, they don't trust you yet. As harsh as that is, like if somebody's saying that they're not trusting you, they don't quite see the value yet. So the question you need to ask is like, okay, how can I make sure that they can see it? And how can I do that in a way that really minimizes risks? And it goes back to the whole idea too of building a relationship. So of course, on both sides, it can be a little bit scary to dive in, especially if you're selling them on maybe a 5-figure retainer or something quite meaty. So yeah, anything you could do to sort of minimize the risk. Sometimes what I'll do as well as I do for more the consulting clients I work with, we'll do I have a 90-minute kind of power hour type of session. So that's under 4 figures. And that's usually an entry point for bigger work for me. Because again, people sometimes people just need to feel it out. They don't really know yet. Like I've sold them, I've talked a big game, but they're still like, okay, but what is going to happen? So those are the two ways I've tried to minimize risk, is test project or a one-off consulting session. And generally people they have such a great time and are so impressed that it does lead to more work. So that would be my tip. But sometimes too, like if I really find I'm getting a lot of pushback, then I just try to let it go, because sometimes it's more not worth it to try to change somebody's mind. Like there's probably other clients out there that are really excited to work with you and can see the value of working with somebody solo versus a huge agency, which can have, you know, overhead and like a lot of bloated costs involved. So yeah, my 50 cents, I guess, on that topic.
I think that's such a great perspective. And I love the idea of a limited scope test project, like something that's very clear that both of you know what's coming out of it, and then clear deadline and stuff like that. When I was closer to having worked at agencies, I'd also highlight that I'm not bringing in anybody else above and or below me. You are getting who you are speaking with today. There's no bait and switch. And that, you know, I have the flexibility of bringing in my network as we need, and keeping them and our budgets, you know, right sized for the project. So that's just something that I used to say. I think that overdo it though, in terms of communicating and educating somebody, because they just might not be ready to. Mm-hmm. And what I saw very clearly when I was at agencies is that you'd spend 2 to 3 months pitching a big client in an RFP where you were competitive with others. You would lose all that time and budget, and then spend the next 3 months recouping those costs by putting junior people on research projects and then buying yourself time. And I think that same lag sometimes happens with freelancers, that you kind of put in too much time and sometimes you miss the mark in terms of listening to the client and what they need. And so instead, just focus, go in with a good set of questions, get a good sense, then say, I'll deliver a scope in terms of alignment, in terms of what I think you're hearing, and then let's take it from there if you're comfortable, but don't overdo it in terms of kind of trying to do too much in terms of pitch and education.
Yeah, I will say, like, it's always been better, the clients who are just excited to work with me from the jump versus the ones where I really had to sell hard, because I've been on both sides. Like there was one client where I sold them hard, I landed it, but then it just didn't work out because I felt like I was still proving myself. Like I was so hard to get in that they still didn't trust me. They're like, okay, sure, you're here, but we're still not fully on board. And they never really got on board, and the project had to end because the relationship didn't go very well. But yeah, on the other side, I've had clients where if they're in from the get-go, it generally tends to be smooth sailing, because there's just that mutual respect, that foundation of trust that can be hard to build. So yeah, great.
Awesome. Well, we're just at time, actually over by a little bit, but thank you so much for the session, Jasmine. Really loved having you. Such great points. And it sounds like you're comfortable sharing a couple follow-up materials with us, which we'll be stoked to put up on the community. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Was incredible, and hope you have a great rest of the week and some fodder to help nail some new clients too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. All right.
All right.
Take care, everybody.